The Giscari Wars had ground to a close, and the Harpy had been dispensed with, an empire ground to naught more than ash and salted fields. The old Giscari Empire had been reduced to a footnote in the annals of time as the dragon soared ascendant. Yet, as in the fable of Icarus flying too close to the sun, so too would the Valyrians fly high, soaring ever closer yet to a brutal and destructive end. However, at this stage of our tale, the clouded skies of impending doom remain far beyond the furthest horizon. Instead, the expansion of the Valyrian freehold was to continue unabated, with earth-shattering consequences for the lands of Essos and Westeros alike. Therefore, in this video, we will explore the continued growth of the Valyrian freehold, and the travails of Andal and Rhoynar alike, who were trodden underfoot for the sake of conquest. Although the memories of Old Ghis and its empire remained firmly within the minds of the former citizens of the lands, the sons and daughters of the ancient Harpy had been annexed into the freehold, and were now either citizens or slaves of the Valyrian state. This subjugation and subsequent integration resulted in the Giscari people abandoning the Giscari tongue in favour of speaking High Valyrian. From the Giscari, the practice of slavery en masse was adopted by the Valyrians, and although the former slave masters of Ghis would be the first to feel the cruelty of Valyrian whips, they would be far from the last. For while the former citizens of the old empire were forced to mine within the depths of the 14 Flames for increasing quantities of copper, tin, iron, gold and silver, the greed of their Valyrian masters continued to grow unabated. The death wrought at the hands of the slave masters of old Valyria is truly beyond comprehension, and as slaves continued to die under brutal conditions in those cursed volcanic mines at unsustainable rates, the Valyrians could think of only one solution to this unfortunate issue: conquest. The Valyrian freehold would expand in all directions. To the east, they launched expeditions beyond even the Giscari cities they had acquired. To the west, the Dragon Riders pushed to the west coast of Essos, where they founded several colonies, such as Myr, Lys, Pentos and Volantis. In the present day, these urban centres still exist as independent city-states. Within a few years, the Valyrians had created an empire which dwarfed even Old Ghis at its maximum territorial extent. The origin of each city was as diverse and varied as those who would come to dwell within these metropolises. The cities of Qohor and Novos came into being following religious schisms in the Valyrian heartland, whereas Old Volantis and Lys were trading settlements first and foremost, founded by the merchant class and those wealthy enough amongst the nobility to purchase the right to independent rule as clients rather than direct subjects of the Valyrian freehold. While the sources are far from consistent on the point in question, it is believed that Pentos and Lorath were founded prior to the coming of the Dragon Lords and chose to pay homage to the evidently militarily superior Valyrians, and as such were able to retain the right to self-rule. The Valyrian stock amongst these cities was composed of residents of the Valyrian heartland who left behind their native peninsula in order to get away from the constant infighting of the major families in their homeland. Of all the cities that sprouted up during the Valyrian Golden Age, Braavos is by far the most unique. In a tale which is still retold even in an era in which the blood of old Valyria has almost entirely run dry, it is said that Braavos stood not by the will of the Dragon Lords, but by those they sought to subdue, and who subsequently rebelled. During the time of the expansion, a gargantuan slaver fleet returning from the Summer and Jade Seas was faced with a massive rebellion, further exacerbated by a mutiny of the non-Valyrian oarsmen. The slaves below the galley decks broke their chains, slew their masters, and seized control of the sizable fleet. After this, these escapees sought out a place in which their would-be enslavers could not hope to find them. It is believed that the Moonsingers laid down a prophecy that the fleet would have to travel to the far northern corner of Essos, a land of fog, mud, and darkened water. There, the free city of Braavos was founded, and there it stood for centuries, hidden from the freehold. Even after they revealed themselves to the world, they would remain known as the Hidden City. However, not all peoples who dared to defy the will of the Dragon Lords did so in hiding. For those who could not suffer to live as slaves to the Valyrians, two options lay before them. They could fight, but this was a foolish endeavour, for dragonfire would brook no fools. The second option would be to flee. The first option had been undertaken wholeheartedly by the Empire of Old Ghis, and their spectacular and violent downfall would call into question the feasibility of such an endeavour. The Rhoynar, the native water singers of the titular River Rhoyne, initially mounted a solid resistance against Valyrian expansion, and even managed to do the unthinkable by killing a few dragons. However, they would soon meet the same fate as another people who at one point had bordered them, the Andals. The Andals had long been a migratory people, rarely staying in one place or establishing firm roots. The earliest surviving histories suggest they originated from the lands of the Axe, east and north of modern-day Pentos. From these humble beginnings, the Andals would strike a path south and west, forging the realm of Andalos by displacing the native hairy men of that region through the might of their iron weapons and iron plate armor. In Andalos, it is believed that the Andals lived in peace for some time. However, events unfolding farther afield would soon bring the Valyrians to their doorstep. For a time, the Rhoynar served as the primary buffer between the Andals and Valyrian aggression. Holding the line at the mighty River Rhoyne, the Rhoynar defeated the Valyrian armies sent against them. Such was the strength of the Rhoynar at this point that they were comparable to that of old geese at its height, and a truce was declared between the freehold and their adversaries. At some point, the Valyrians established a truce with the Rhoynar and established a colony at the mouth of the River Rhoyne, the city of Volantis. This city flourished upon the trade that flowed along the arteries of that great river. It was here that the Valyrians would first come into contact with the Andals. A war of expansion into Andalos soon followed, and although Andal resistance was fierce, the strength of the ascendant Valyrian freehold was undeniable. Faced with an unstoppable tide of well-armed and armoured infantry and cavalry with experienced dragon riders at their head, the Andals were left with little choice but to give ground. They would initially surrender much of Andalos, retreating to the land of their forebears, the Axe. However, even these gains were insufficient to douse the flames of the Valyrian lust for conquest. As the Andals retreated ever further, eventually reaching the sea, many would have despaired, while many more steeled themselves for a final stand. This would prove futile, for those Andals who chose to fight were simply consumed by molten plumes of dragonfire. Nevertheless, the Andals refused to live under Valyrian overlordship. To that end, they constructed a great armada, crossed the narrow sea, and made war upon the first men of Westeros. This, however, is a tale for another series. With the Andals now out of reach of the Freehold's desperate slavers, the Valyrian Empire needed another source of forced manpower for the ever-escalating excavations beneath the 14 Flames. As such, the truce which had been formed with the Rhoynar seemed but a frail thing beneath the winds of change. Consequently, war erupted with the Children of the Rhoyne River once more, but the Rhoynar would prove to be a formidable adversary, possessing a form of water magic capable of countering dragonfire. The first outbreak of hostilities between the Valyrians and the Rhoynar became known as the First Turtle War, and would last little more than a moon's turn. This war occurred because the Valyrians butchered one of the giant turtles which dwelt upon the Rhoyne, and were believed to be the consorts of Mother Rhoyne herself. The Rhoynish city of Sarmel was subsequently raided and burned. However, the Rhoynar would ultimately emerge victorious. The famed Rhoynish water wizards called upon the power of the Rhoyne itself and flooded the Valyrian city of Volantheris. While the sources differ on the effect of the water magic, it is widely held that half the city was washed away. The wars waged between these two mighty peoples are beyond the ability of any chronicler to recount. Many more conflicts would be fought between them, such as the Second Turtle War, the Fisherman's War, the Salt War, the Third Turtle War, the War on Dagger Lake, and the Spice War. In spite of the sheer strength of the Valyrian freehold, the tail spear, turtle shell shield, and fish head helms of the Rhoynish warriors proved more than capable of exacting a bloody toll upon their neighbours. Despite the might of the Rhoynish people, most of these wars resulted in Valyrian victories, not only due to the strength of the Valyrian dragons, but also Valyrian political unity. Each Rhoynish city fought alone, fiercely independent, unyielding and unwilling to bend, while also remaining intransigent and unable to accept that aid from their distant kinsfolk would be required to stay the tide of Valyrian expansion. By way of comparison, the Valyrian colonies could count upon one another to provide aid throughout the continued outbursts of violence with their Rhoynish neighbours, and if necessary, they would call upon their counterparts within the freehold proper for aid. All of this changed with the sacking of Sahoy, the greatest of the Rhoynar cities which lay upon the Summer Sea. Its warriors were slaughtered, its women and children enslaved, and the city itself was razed to the ground. This caused a change in tact for the Rhoynish, who determined it necessary now to band together against a common foe. This brings us to the bloody climax of the Rhoynish Wars. However, this is the story for our next documentary on the history of the world of Ice and Fire. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the rise and fall of the Valyrian Freehold. But we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.